Alright, sometimes I sit down and look at Honkai Star Rail and I get a little bit sentimental. Like, over the course of my time playing it, I've only ever wanted the best for it, whether that's through players enjoying it, fun gameplay being released, a good story for players to go through, or whatever else. When the game delivers, I'm happy and I hope it continues to do well before anything else. But when it doesn't, that's when I feel like I have to comment on it in hopes that it will improve someday. So, after playing through the new Anomaly Arbitration game mode on stream a couple weeks ago, it kinda got me thinking about why I feel like I need to discuss things more often than not with HSR. And my conclusion was one thing that I feel the new game mode encapsulates almost perfectly. It's basically that all the different things with the game usually end up being almost great, but somehow still end up missing the mark in some way. So today, I wanted to talk about what's up with the new game mode and why it's made me feel like the game is like that. First, as a precursor, let me explain the game mode a little bit and give some context around what it's meant to be. For one, it was marketed as the new endgame mode, both in their news posts explaining it, on their live streams when discussing it, and even in game because it requires you to have at least one max star clear of all the other different endgame modes, which are Pure Fiction, MOC, and Apocalyptic Shadow. To break the game mode down simply, there are 4 stages you have to clear, 3 of which are basically mini-boss stages, and 1 of which is the main fight of the game mode. But just because they're quote-unquote mini-bosses doesn't mean it's really a walk in the park. They are still genuinely difficult fights, but we'll talk about the difficulty a little bit later. In short, you can actually fight the main boss whenever you want, but you're heavily incentivized to fight those mini-boss stages because those mini-boss stages actually weaken the main boss, and therefore make it much easier to clear the game mode. But again, make no mistake here, being easier basically means it's clearable rather than pretty much impossible. On top of the bosses being pretty difficult in terms of their raw HP pools, the damage they deal, and their actual mechanics, there's also debuffs on each of the stages to make it even more challenging. For example, on one of the stages your characters lose crit damage depending on the HP of the enemy they're fighting, and on another you lose HP by taking different actions. These all add a different level of nuance to the fights because you have to consider how you might be able to counteract them on top of all the other difficulties that these stages have. So if you haven't gotten it so far, these are tough fights. Like, there are a lot of things you need to keep in mind before you even take on the stages. Like, are you properly speed tuned? Do you have the right units? Are those units built right? Do you have good synergies? Is there any way to make the debuffs from the stages actually benefit you, or are there ways that you can actually counteract those debuffs? And genuinely, I have to say that I actually really do enjoy that part of this game mode. One of the things that I've always critiqued HSR for is that you pretty much never actually have to think while playing. I mean, let's be honest here, for the most part if you want, you can just hit the fun button top right and you won't have to worry about basically anything while you're playing the game. Oh, the auto finished. Nice. But in this mode, that just doesn't really work. Like, if you wanted to actually do that, not only would you have to be able to auto all 3 of the default endgame modes, but you would also have to pretty much have a perfect team setup if you wanted to even attempt doing that in Anomaly Arbitration. What this does is basically create a giant filter to even access the mode, and personally, I think that's great. Like, this is the kind of stuff that people have been asking for years in the different Hoyo games. There's always been a small subset of the community that has wanted truly difficult content that players can interact with, and finally, after all these years of asking for it, well, we're actually getting it. While it definitely isn't perfect, I do have to say that I think it's awesome that we are finally getting something like this. Something else that I really like with this game mode is that the rewards from it aren't things that really mean all that much. Like, here's all you can get from the game mode. A pet, which is basically a reskin of the Bubbles pet from the Seal Slammers event a while back, an outfit for Pom Pom, 2 profile pictures, a phone background, and some universal materials that you can use to upgrade your character's traces. Depending on how much of the mode you can clear, you can also get a frame for your profile picture, as well as some self-modeling resin and a stat blocker to use with your reliquary rollers. For the most part, these kind of things are something that I've been saying should be added to the game for ages now. Like, ignoring the fact that it's attached to a difficult endgame mode, I think it is great that there are some obtainable things that aren't just handed to you through an event or whatever. In the past, I've suggested having some stuff like the profile pictures and phone wallpapers added for players to work towards, but also more unique things related to our characters, like weapon skins for example. While the pet and pom-pom skin aren't exactly what I had in mind in terms of the skins, I do think it's a step in the right direction to have some more exclusive things that players can actually work towards. Like if you can't clear Anomaly Arbitration stages now, well, the rewards will be there until you actually can clear it to get the currency you need to buy the different items. And that right there is what's known as a chase goal. Like this is the kind of thing that gives a new player that likes endgame content something to be excited for, and it also gives them something to look forward to and be like, hell yeah, I want to get there and be able to clear that content someday. For a while now, that goal was pretty much just being able to clear the 3 different endgame modes, but I think having it all consolidated into one game mode that requires you to clear all the prior ones is a great way to do it. I also think it goes without saying that not having Stellar Jades attached to this game mode is a pretty good thing as well. On paper, it means that the players that don't really care about the endgame, or those players that just rely on the fun button to clear content, don't really have to be all that concerned with it. Like, let's be real here, having a profile picture of a hamster or getting a pajama outfit for Pom Pom isn't going to make or break your account. It's basically just something that's kinda cute to have. In practice though, having no rewards tied to it can lead to the game mode actually getting more unique mechanics and honestly being kinda crazy, which I think is a good thing. While the HP has consistently gone up in the regular game modes, they've generally not added anything to make the fights more unique. Like, we're still fighting the same Svarog and MOC that we fought back in 1.x. We're still going up against Kokoli and Apocalyptic Shadow just like we did when that game mode released. And at least personally, I feel they've kept those modes relatively simple so that anyone has the opportunity to clear them. All of those modes are basically just an investment check, where after a certain amount of time, as long as you've been consistently spending your stamina and upgrading your characters, you'll probably be able to clear it, especially so with the auto mode. But with Anomaly Arbitration automatically filtering out a portion of the player base through difficulty, and then yet another portion by not offering great rewards, in my eyes this is a great opportunity for them to make the mode truly unique by offering different mechanics that aren't found in the other modes. Like, who's to say that the Lygus fight in the Anomaly mode can't be different from the one that you fight in MOC? There really is a lot of potential for great content with this mode, and I am really looking forward to the possibilities that it could bring if it's iterated on going forward. I do hope that they make it at least a little bit more accessible so that more players can actually interact with the mode, but I think as a baseline it isn't all that bad as long as they continue to iterate on it. With that said, this definitely isn't a perfect game mode. It is pretty hard to browse any kind of forum or discussion related to HSR and avoid talks about the problems that the game mode has. For one, there are massive HP pools. I mean, even the weakened final boss still has over 40 million HP, which, let's be real here, is kinda crazy. On top of that, there is pretty harsh shilling for different team compositions. The debuffs I mentioned earlier pretty much push you towards running certain things like Super Break against the first one, or Dot against the second. They also added in an entirely new mechanic to some of the fights. For example, instead of all the monsters spawning at once in the second mini-boss on its first wave, they only spawn in after you defeat some of the enemies that are already on the field. What this does is effectively make the wave a 3-wave encounter instead of 2, which pretty much just adds an artificial level of difficulty to the fight. And lastly, speaking of artificial difficulty, the most important and also the biggest problem in my opinion is that they added even more artificial difficulty to the game mode by giving specific requirements in terms of the time you have to clear each stage. See, if you want to get all the rewards from the game mode, even if they're not all that important, you have to clear each of the stages in 2 cycles or less. And again, these aren't easy fights to clear to begin with, let alone in 2 cycles. Like, not only do you have to beat the fight in a very short amount of time, but you're also dealing with the other things I mentioned earlier. The increased HP of all the monsters, the debuffs on each of the stages, the artificial difficulty of having extra waves, and everything else, all of that consolidates into a difficult fight that not many people will be able to actually clear. And again, on paper, I think difficult fights are actually a good thing. I have absolutely zero problems with there being difficult content, and in fact, I welcome it. But with that said, I don't think that all these difficulties, and particularly the artificial parts, are all that great. In fact, I'd say that the timer specifically is actually a massive detriment to the game mode, and it's also why I feel that despite all the good stuff the game mode has, it really can't be more than almost good in its current state. Basically, as it stands, each and every fight in this game is a race against the clock, and that doesn't really lend itself to players being able to have any kind of creativity. Really, what I was looking for when I asked for difficult content all this time was content that was designed in pushing that idea, letting players be as creative as they want to clear it. At least personally, that's where I find a lot of fun with content like this. You know, figuring out how to clear something with the limited resources you have available is and always will be super interesting to me. And I think a gacha game where each and every account is different is literally the perfect scenario for gameplay like this to exist. It's kind of like the same feeling you get when you play a roguelike game, where all your runs will be different from each other, except in this case it's the players that create the difference instead of the random RNG from something like an item drop. But when there's a timer attached, that just straight up limits that creativity. There is no room for variance when the entire game mode is designed around killing specific things and clearing it under a specific time. I really do think that it is a huge detriment to the possibilities of the game mode, and going forward, I think if this game mode really wants to be something great, then Hoyo needs to do just one thing to fix it. They need to remove the cycle timer and let players actually play the game mode. Like, let's take a moment to imagine a world where that timer wasn't there. You'd be able to run anything as long as you have the perseverance to do so. If you want to run a non-optimal team comp like follow-up into the stage that really shills Dot, go ahead, why not? Want to run an off-element damage dealer into the stage specifically designed for breaking the enemies? Well, why couldn't you? Want to run a team composition entirely filled with healers and shielders? Well, in my eyes, that's a great idea, you should do it. In my head, this game mode would be the perfect opportunity for this to happen specifically because there are no real rewards attached to it. If someone wants to spend an hour clearing one stage with a sustain-only comp just so they can get a pom-pom outfit, well, I would love to see the run for that, so let them give it a shot. But unfortunately, it's just not possible for that to happen because Hoyo doesn't allow it with the arbitrary difficulty of a timer being put into the mode. Really, all I'm asking for here is truly difficult content. Like the extra HP, that's not a big deal if the timer is gone. Having fake extra waves, that also wouldn't matter. Hell, they could even do stuff like adding in one-shots to the fights that require you to do specific mechanics, but that's just frankly not something that they can do while there's a timer to deal with on top of all those other things. Like, genuinely, this is a game mode that's pretty much unlike most of the others in all the other Hoyo games, specifically because of how difficult it is on top of the lack of rewards that are tied to rolling currency. It's a game mode that has literally infinite potential for adding in new mechanics and real difficulty, but instead they decided to just add a timer to the game mode, and it's honestly really frustrating that that's the route they decided to take with the mode. I do actually see a lot of value in a mode like this. Like, even in its current state with the timer, I think it's a worthwhile addition to the game. But I can't say it's actually a good mode, and that's what's honestly kind of annoying to me with it. Like, if I can see the potential as a player, I know there is no way that Hoyo and the dev team for HSR can't also see that potential. But I also feel that it's being squandered with the current implementation of it. Going forward, I really would love to see the timer removed from Anomaly Arbitration, and I feel like it is definitely the big thing holding the game mode back from being great. Otherwise, as it stands, I see this mode very, very quickly becoming a mode that hardly anyone interacts with because the rewards aren't meaningful enough for most players to push through all the artificial difficulty that the game mode has in it. That said, if they do want to keep the timer, I think another thing they could do is what I said earlier in this video, which is give the characters in the game things that are only obtainable in this mode, rather than the basic stuff like the pom-pom skin or the pet reskin. In my opinion, the rewards as they stand definitely aren't enough for the level of difficulty required to clear, and while I definitely don't think they need to add Stellar Jades to the reward pool, I do think they could be a lot more creative with them in general. As an example, in Genshin Impact they recently released their new endgame mode Stygian Onslaught, and for clearing the highest difficulty levels you get weapon skins, which is something that I've wanted in HSR for a long time. Ideally, they would be more accessible than they are in Genshin because the requirements over there are even crazier than the ones in HSR, but the idea is there at the very least. Hopefully, we see some changes to make the mode more palatable overall so it feels less like a letdown and also less like just another endgame mode like all the other ones. Again, I want to reiterate here that I do see a ton of potential with this game mode, but it all really boils down to whether or not Hoyo wants to make changes and also iterate on it. For now, my rating stands as it's alright, but it's not good. Anyway, that's all my thoughts, and I appreciate you listening if you made it this far. If you have some thoughts of your own on this topic, I'd love to hear about it, so feel free to leave a comment down below or join my Discord link down in the description to talk with me about it. As usual, thank you so much for watching, subscribe, and if you haven't already, maybe give my other videos a shot too.